Hey everyone! The first trailer for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey just dropped, and today I'm breaking down the entire trailer frame by frame. I'll show you all the hidden details, Easter eggs, and characters you might have missed. So let's get started. Before we jump into the trailer, let's talk about what this movie is actually about. The original Odyssey by Homer tells the story of Odysseus, king of Ithaca, and his crazy 10-year journey home after the Trojan War. It's an epic tale full of courage, cunning, loyalty, and one man's desperate fight to get back to his family. After helping the Greeks win the Trojan War using his famous Trojan Horse trick, Odysseus faces an even bigger challenge: actually getting home. The released prologue footage reportedly shows Odysseus coming out of the Trojan Horse, setting him up as this legendary warrior before his real struggles even begin. Odysseus's trip home takes 10 years, and he faces all these mythic threats along the way. The Cyclops, Polyphemus, a one-eyed giant who traps Odysseus and his men in a cave. Odysseus blinds him to escape, but this pisses off Poseidon, the Cyclops' father and god of the sea. Circe the sorceress, a powerful witch who turns his crew into animals before Odysseus resists her magic and gets them freed. The Sirens, dangerous creatures whose songs are so beautiful they lure sailors to crash and die. Scylla and Charybdis, a six-headed monster and a deadly whirlpool that force Odysseus to make impossible choices. The underworld. Odysseus actually goes to the land of the dead to get advice from spirits. Meanwhile, in Ithaca, Odysseus' family is dealing with their own problems. His wife Penelope is fighting off dozens of suitors who want to marry her and take over the throne. His son Telemachus has grown up without his dad and goes searching for any news about whether Odysseus is even alive. This back and forth between the journey and what's happening at home creates some serious tension. When Odysseus finally makes it back to Ithaca, he disguises himself as a beggar because his palace is overrun with suitors. He reveals himself to Telemachus. They plan a brutal attack on the suitors, and Odysseus proves his identity to Penelope through a test only the real Odysseus would pass. Then he takes back his kingdom and his family. The trailer opens with this haunting shot of a desert covered in battle aftermath. Helmets, shields, spears, all buried in the sand. There's a complete suit of armor lying on the ground, which is probably Odysseus's armor, since we see Matt Damon wearing it in other shots. The person standing next to it is likely Odysseus himself. This scene shows the moment after winning the Trojan War, right before he's about to start his journey home. Next, we see Odysseus bowing to someone who's likely Agamemnon. You can tell by his cool helmet, played by Benny Safdie. Agamemnon was the commander of all Greek forces during the Trojan War. You might be wondering why Odysseus, who's a king himself, is bowing to Agamemnon. It's because of the military hierarchy during the war. Agamemnon was in charge of everyone, so Odysseus bows as a sign of respect. We also briefly see Menelaus, played by Jon Bernthal. He's Agamemnon's brother, king of Sparta, and husband of Helen of Troy. Actually, the whole Trojan War started because Paris of Troy kidnapped Helen, so Menelaus had a huge personal stake in the war. This scene is probably Odysseus saying goodbye before heading home, since all the Greek kings are returning to their kingdoms after the victory. We get two shots of Odysseus and his men beginning their trip through thick jungles. His voiceover says, "After years of war, no one could stand between my men and home." This line shows Odysseus's confidence as a leader and how powerful his warriors are. They just survived the biggest war ever. Nothing should be able to stop them now, right? But here's the thing. If you know the story, you know everything's about to go horribly wrong. Right when Odysseus says the word home, the trailer cuts to show what looks like Ithaca. This editing is really clever. They're literally showing us his home when he mentions it. But it also hints at the two big threats coming: the dangers that will kill his men during the voyage, and the suitors invading his home. Then we see Telemachus played by Tom Holland, and Penelope played by Anne Hathaway talking, and they both look super worried. They're stressed about whether Odysseus is coming back and dealing with the fact that their kingdom has no king. This confirms that Nolan will show both stories at the same time, cutting between Odysseus's adventures at sea and his family's problems at home. Penelope is constantly being pressured by the suitors. The main one is the arrogant Antinous, played by Robert Pattinson. He's not in this trailer, but we've seen him in the stills released earlier. There's also this maid named Melantho, played by Mia Goth, who's sided with the suitors, which makes things even worse for Penelope. The next shot shows Odysseus leading his men across the ocean in their boats. His voiceover finishes the earlier thought by adding, "Not even me." So the full line is, "After years of war, no one could stand between my men and home, not even me." This is pretty ominous. It suggests that Odysseus himself will somehow become an obstacle, whether through his decisions, his pride, or just the consequences of his actions. Then we get what's probably the best visual shot in the whole trailer: soldiers pulling the massive Trojan horse out of the sea, getting ready to deliver it to Troy. The next clips take us inside the horse during the actual mission. We see one soldier get stabbed through the wooden body of the horse, and his buddies desperately cover his mouth to keep him quiet. They can't let anyone know they're in there. This looks like it's going to show the Trojan horse not as this glorious victory, but as a terrifying, claustrophobic gamble that almost goes wrong. Odysseus and his men go into a cave for shelter, and we get our first look at the Cyclops. In Greek mythology, Cyclops are these giant, one-eyed creatures with insane strength. The most famous one is Polyphemus, who's the son of Poseidon. Here's what happens in the original story. Odysseus and his crew land on an island looking for food and find this cave stocked with supplies. When they help themselves, Polyphemus comes back and traps them inside by rolling this huge boulder across the entrance. Then the Cyclops starts eating the crew members one by one. Odysseus comes up with a smart escape plan. He gets Polyphemus drunk with wine, then blinds him with a heated wooden stake. To escape, the surviving Greeks hide under Polyphemus's sheep as they leave the cave, because the blinded Cyclops can only feel the tops of the animals as they pass. But here's where Odysseus screws up. His pride makes him reveal his real name as they're escaping. This lets Polyphemus call on his father Poseidon for revenge, which is why Poseidon makes the rest of their voyage a nightmare. It's really interesting that Nolan is including these mythical creatures, especially since he usually doesn't use CGI in his movies. It'll be cool to see how he brings the Cyclops to life. In this creepy sequence, we see Odysseus with just a few surviving soldiers at night, and dead warriors start rising up from the sand around them. This seems to be Nolan's take on the underworld part from Homer's story. In the original Odyssey, Odysseus visits the realm of the dead to get advice from spirits, and he talks to ghosts of fallen warriors, but they don't actually attack him. Nolan looks like he's turning this into a horror-style scene where the dead literally come out of the ground. This could mean a few things. It might represent all the crew members who've died on the journey, the mental trauma of war showing up as something supernatural, or maybe it's divine punishment from an angry god like Poseidon. It's a really cool way to show the guilt and loss that Odysseus is carrying. We see Odysseus and his men battling huge storms at sea, and Odysseus is actually pulling the oars himself alongside his crew. This is important. It shows he's not just giving orders, but actually doing the hard work with his men. In Homer's story, the sea becomes the main enemy, especially because Poseidon is mad at Odysseus. Storms and shipwrecks kill a lot of his men. Odysseus survives because he's smart, quick thinking, and sometimes gets help from Athena, the goddess of wisdom who looks out for him. These storm scenes probably happen throughout the middle of the movie, showing how the crew keeps getting smaller with each disaster. The trailer ends with this heartbreaking moment. Penelope says, "Promise me you'll come back." Odysseus just responds, "What if I can't?" This scene happens before he even leaves for the Trojan War, setting up the emotional weight from the very start. It's a promise that'll take 20 years to keep, 10 years fighting the war, 10 years trying to get home. This trailer is a perfect example of how trailers should be done. It shows you the scale and stakes without spoiling too much. We get mythology, action, emotion, and amazing visuals. But we still don't know exactly how Nolan's going to pull off this ancient epic. There are several major characters who aren't in this trailer, but will definitely have big roles in the movie. Athena, played by Zendaya, the goddess of wisdom who guides and protects Odysseus throughout his journey, giving him advice and divine help when he needs it. Circe, played by Charlize Theron, the sorceress who turns men into animals. She represents temptation and the supernatural dangers of the journey. Eurylochus, played by Himesh Patel, Odysseus's second-in-command. He's loyal, but sometimes questions Odysseus's decisions. Eumaeus, played by John Leguizamo, the faithful swineherd who stays loyal to Odysseus's household and helps him take back his palace. Antinous, played by Robert Pattinson, the main suitor. He's arrogant and ruthless, plotting against both Telemachus and Odysseus. Melantho played by Mia Goth, the disloyal maid who sides with the suitors, making the situation in the palace even worse. That's my complete breakdown. Let me know in the comments if you spotted any details I missed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.